California is the state that absolutely vetted marijuana more than any other state. Since at least the 1970s, Californians have been talking about, voting on, disputing marijuana like no other place in the United States, and frankly the world, and I think moving towards legalization.
The thing that's most striking to me about marijuana is the decades, not years, not months, but decades, where this battle goes on, and it's the pro versus the anti.
With marijuana comes eventual confrontation with the law. Well, its mere possession, in the eyes of the federal statutes, brings a minimum of 2 years, and selling a maximum of 40.
The simplest way to think about what happens is, which I think is very interesting, is that as the problem gets worse, the anti-forces become strong. As the problem gets better, the pro-forces get stronger. From 1978 to 1991, marijuana use in this country went down by 60%. When it went down, it sowed the seeds of the renaissance of the pro-marijuana movement, because it went away as an issue, and all the force that was behind marijuana vanished. Now we're in a period when it's going up, and everything that's happening now, the legalization, the medical marijuana, all this stuff, is driving those marijuana use rates up.
We weren't awake 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or back in 1996 when it passed. Everybody legitimately thought that this was going to help terminally ill people. We were fooled. And you look at it now, it's so clear to all of us, and I think clear to the average Californian.
When we look at the history of marijuana in the United States, one has to begin with California, and one has to begin with a law in 1996 called Prop 215. It was so broadly written that it created many of the problems that are, to this day, almost 20 years later, still vexing.
If you talk to California voters today, they had no idea they were voting for this.
In 1996, the argument was really, this is not legalizing marijuana, this is only for seriously sick, dying, or sense-threatened people.
When you read Proposition 215, it leads the voter to believe they're voting for something to help somebody out who's dying on their deathbed. But there's a sentence in that proposition that most of us didn't read that says you can get marijuana for any condition whatsoever that provides relief. That's anything.
The only thing you need in the state of California to get a medical marijuana card is $100 and a story. You need to tell a physician who's sitting somewhere near, generally speaking, a cannabis club, that you have an old injury from high school, that you have anxiety, that you have depression, that you have trauma from your childhood, and he or she will prescribe you a medical marijuana card. You take that card to go to the dispensary, and from that moment forward, you are a licensed medical marijuana user.
They tricked us, and I mean us, all of us in California. And now we're dealing with the ramifications of that.
Guys smoke weed? Fuck yeah, tell them how much you smoke, man. I'll be honest with you, the weed in California is the best weed, man.
You got more than 1,000 pot stores on the streets of LA. More pot stores than Starbucks, 7-Elevens, McDonald's, banks, and all the schools combined.
It allows people to, enjoy themselves. I mean, I don't see a problem with that. And I don't smoke, and I'm totally okay with it.
This right here allows you to have a certain amount of weed on you at all times. It also allows you to go into a medical store and purchase some marijuana.
We know that our body's brains and cells make chemicals similar to marijuana. That means that we actually can respond to it in a way that might be therapeutic. So I don't think that everybody who smokes marijuana is lying about the fact that it helps them. 2 shots of vodka might also help them. Doesn't mean that we make that a medicine.
You can't do it in front of the cops, but you can smoke weed, they can stop you, you can have weed on you, but they can't do shit to you because you got a medical card. It's like having a badge, you know what I'm saying? You just flip it out on them and they can't do shit.
Here's the irony here in California. We've done a great job getting people to quit smoking cigarettes. I mean, it's remarkable. You can't smoke on many of our beaches, you can't smoke in a restaurant because it's bad for you. Well, so is smoking marijuana, plus you get all the other THC, tetrahydrocannabinol. So how can the state say it's okay to smoke dope, but we want you to stop smoking cigarettes? Alice in Wonderland. We've gone down the rabbit hole in California. I hope nobody else does across the globe.
A lot of people have this view of America being the freest country on earth, but we have one of the biggest prison populations per capita in the world. How can that be in the freest country in the world? Something's wrong with this picture.
We have
1,000,000 people in prison in the United States, and about half of those people are drug-related offenses. In California, we've gone a long way to reduce penalties for minor possessions and possession of marijuana, but it still remains a felony to grow even one plant in California. It still is a crime. And still, if you go to the courthouses today, you'll see almost half the calendar of marijuana cases still, okay? People think, oh, it's legalized, there's no problem. Well, go down to the courthouse and find out how much problems it is, and find out how many people are being arrested more this year than the year before, and the year before that, and the year before that. So it's very disheartening to sit here after 40-some years and find pretty much we're talking about the same issues, trying to figure out what it is that has caused us to lead this path.
I've been cultivating marijuana since about 1975, when it was illegal. I began cultivating to supply my ex-wife, Valerie, marijuana for her epileptic seizures. She was in a car accident, sustained head injuries, and became epileptic as a result of those injuries.
My seizure disorder was a result of a car accident in 1973. One day, you're in university, and the next day, you're hospitalized for brain trauma and unable to string a sentence together. Seeking an alternative to the drugs that were not controlling my some 5 grand moles a day on a bad day, and being hospitalized at least once a month, I sought an alternative. Finding something so simple as using marijuana was an astonishing finding, one that was difficult for me to believe, because my insurance company was spending a great deal of money on neurosurgeons, and there were no alternatives.
We always grew 5 plants every year. And whenever a friend would be diagnosed with cancer or HIV, because we always had marijuana, and we would give it to them.
Valerie started sharing what she had with other patients, and the WOM Collective was born. For years, we could only serve the sickest patients, mostly cancer and AIDS. But within the last couple of years, we've been able to expand our membership, serve more people, and just try to provide that quality of patient care. We work together to help take care of each other, even unto death. You know, we do a lot of hospice work because we have a lot of terminal patients. Marijuana has not gained acceptance as a medication, even though at one point 3 of my doctors recommended it for me to treat the pain. I had polio as an infant, and now I have post-polio syndrome, and I have a lot of muscle spasms, muscle pain, nerve pain. I'm allergic to opiates, and they don't really work for nerve pain anyway, so I really don't have many options for pain control, and this is what I choose to use.
From 1996 to now, there's been 3 other propositions on the ballot, and it all started out with so-called helping sick people. Now that same group, that same core that promoted that, is now trying to legalize marijuana outright.
It's practically legal anyway. Anyone can go to the store and get a medical card for $45.
What really happens is the media, when they report on this, they're going to go out of their way to go find somebody who's got AIDS or cancer to interview for their quote in their story. They're not going to sit out in front of a marijuana store and go talk to the 19-year-old kid on the skateboard. That doesn't make a great story.
Everybody I know smokes. Come on, you're in LA, what do you expect?
There's a room for abuse here by people who are getting a card, and of course they're not using the medical marijuana, they're probably just using recreationally, using marijuana off the street, and if they happen to get caught, they say, oh, you know, I have a card.
A California study of 7,000 patients found that the average medical marijuana user, the 32-year-old white male who had used cocaine in his lifetime, had no history of chronic disease. So medical marijuana in California has turned into a sad joke. That doesn't mean that there aren't medical properties in the marijuana plant that we should research and investigate, but we should do that in the laboratory, not in the ballot box.
My name is Christian Klump. I'm the director of 420 Collective since August 2008. This is our security guy, Jim. He will check IDs so that qualified patients come and see us and become members of our collective. I was always against an armed guard. Now it is required. The patient will come in here. We will have them fill out a form which basically explains our rules. Most of our patients are older people. We don't allow anyone under 21. Through the internet, we're able to verify the doctor recommendation. There are services on the internet with code numbers where you can see, okay, this is legitimate. It's just way more stricter than you would be at any pharmacy who sells way more dangerous drugs than we do. 6 years ago, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer and battled that, had surgery, was very fortunate to come back from that, and that has opened my eyes up to the idea of getting involved in the medical marijuana business. This is our actual dispensary where we have all things medicine. There's products for everyone. Edibles, drinkables, creams. As you can see now, this has become an industry. These are very well done, professionally made products. I would agree with smoking not being the best form of medication, yet it's the one that's most broadly known and is the fastest. Any kind of edibles that need to be chewed take about 30 to 45 minutes to become effective. Here's an interesting product. Unfortunately, we're out right now. You can see how popular it is. If you're familiar with breath mint strips, I think everybody might know about that yet. This is the product that will not only give you medication, but it'll give you a nice fresh breath. It's a peppermint product. You can take it in a plane. You can take it anywhere you go. You can go to church and medicate, and you have complete privacy. Then we have our selection of flowers. At the moment, we have like 21 flavors. It's basically 3 types of cannabis. Sativa and indica are the 2 prevalent kind that we have, and everything in between would be called a hybrid. There's a lot of room for people to find out what works for them. So this is how we're supposed to package this up. Out of sight, with clearly labeled, stapled bag, closed up. On this label itself are the drug facts. Warning, keep out of reach of children. Providing to or allowing a minor to take possession of cannabis is a felony. Penal Code 273. For medical use only. Warning, this product contains a chemical known to the state of California to cause cancer. Warning, may be habit-forming or dangerous to children. Consult with your physician. So we take extreme steps to make sure that people are well-informed what this is all about. The idea behind this packaging is that the patient takes this, it's hidden, he can put it in his pocket wherever. As soon as he gets in his vehicle, this is supposed to go into the trunk of the vehicle away from the driver so he can go home, take the medication. If he would be stopped, the patient would show his doctor recommendation, and that would be nothing more than on your way, sir, from the police.
We're located in a part of California known as the Inland Empire. This region of California has done really good at keeping these marijuana dispensaries out. But it's because of parents and teachers and priests and bishops, people just coming together going, we see what happened in LA and San Francisco. And so for me, sure, I've been in law enforcement, lieutenant commander in the military, served in Iraq, worked in the White House for 6 years. Put all that aside, what do I care about most? I'm a dad, and I got to fight to make sure that my 3 kids have got a state worth growing up in. Many areas of California have literally gone to pot.
In some ways, it's Mickey Mouse's fault. Because back when Epcot Center got developed down at Walt Disney World in the late 1970s, they showed hydroponic farming, which was intended to show that we could grow our own crops on other planets where we didn't have Earth soil. But obviously some other people figured that out, and it became the way to grow marijuana. And then through genetic engineering and hybridization and all those kinds of techniques that we've used in giant agriculture, marijuana has become extremely potent. Some would say 15 to 20 times more potent than it was 30 years ago.
I used to teach a course in plant nutrition, and so I wrote a manual for the students to use. It gives the ingredients, etc., and it shows what it's like. And you take distilled water or demineralized water, and you dissolve in it the salts that supply the nutrient elements. That's the nutrient solution. And then you germinate seeds and put the seedlings into a container over that solution so that the rootlets are in the solution, and then you grow the plants. There are countries where hydroponics solution culture is used to a large extent. In Holland, they have very large areas where they grow flowers in solution culture or hydroponics. The same in Israel. In other words, countries that are small and not rich in resources. In this country, I think the main use is probably for growing pot. They don't want to go out in the open, so they rent some houses in respectable neighborhoods and install a hydroponics installation and grow pot. So, in that sense, I was an accessory to growing pot.
All right, well, here's a grow room. This is like a classic ebb and flow system. Here's the basic setup. This is what you would need to replicate a grow like this. In the bed itself, this is a product that we use. It's Rockwolf, ideally manufactured for this purpose of growing hydroponically. You would stick your clone in here. The roots would grow inside, and as the water floods and ebbs, nutrients get provided to the roots, and it goes up and down several times a day, depending on preference. In nature, as the days get shorter, plants tend to finish their life cycle, so they want to reproduce. And the reproduction, or The part that we call the flower is this part here. This is the actual flower part. You can see the hairs. The hairs have sticky stuff which would attract male pollen. Since we don't provide male pollen, this will grow bigger and bigger, and it will probably come up to this size and will be full of resin. If you will, you might see the first amounts of resin. See this here as a little bit of dust right there on here, and if I would rub my finger on it, as I do, it has already the distinctive odor of the finished product. These curl usually up a little bit, and you trim all that off, and this would be the final. If you imagine all this stuff gone or snipped away, this would be what the bud was, about 10 times as big. And that would be the marijuana. My hands are already getting sticky. That is the substance that we go after. Attention to detail is very, very important. We're trying to we do in 10 to 12 weeks what nature takes 6, 7, 8 months. It's like any agricultural product. The difference is we have to come up with our own resources. Up to a few years ago, it was very hard to come up with new. Everybody had to invent their own stuff, make their own nutrient solution. Now everybody has picked up on it, and it's like you know, the shovels for the gold rush. It's whatever invention it takes to make that happen.
In 1848, gold was the word for California. It lured men in an explosion of migration from the ends of the earth with pick, pan, long tom, and cradle. Gold was the key that unlocked the storehouse of wealth that lay behind the Sierran barrier.
No, there's clearly millions of dollars to be made in medical marijuana. It doesn't mean that every dispensary is making millions of dollars, but certain medical marijuana dispensaries make an upwards of millions and millions of dollars a year in profit.
The marijuana industry is all about the money. You've got the doctors making money. You've got the marijuana shops that are elaborate, orchestrated businesses with these bud tenders giving 20 different strains of marijuana to so-called patients.
Medical marijuana right now, I think it's a very big industry here in California. And also, it has the potential to be a very big revenue for the state of California as far as taxes from selling marijuana.
Millions. I believe that officially the state of California got $100 million in taxes. Nobody else gets taxed as heavy as that.
And you gotta remember, 10,000 marijuana stores in California, even if we know it's wrong, we want to turn it back, we're going up against big money. They're giving money to elected candidates, to district attorneys that are taking their money. How do I compete against that? We are always at the losing end of the money issue.
Hey, welcome to Weedmaps. Weedmaps was started in August of 2008 by me and my friend Keith. He's a developer, a friend of mine for a long time. We had a restaurant, Felix's Continental Cafe in Orange County. We just got our medical marijuana cards, but we didn't know where to go. It's like we heard about a couple places, a couple dispensaries, but you know, we didn't really know. So we basically made a website for ourselves just to show and see a map and plot all the dispensaries near you. It was just kind of novel at the time. Nobody was doing that. It was probably about 60 days into it is when I was looking at traffic, and I had dozens of other sites. But the traffic curve on it was one of those exponential, viral type of curves that you want to see now on your sites that you never really do see. I just knew that even though the traffic was relatively small, maybe a couple hundred hits a day, I knew that the potential was huge. Law enforcement, knock on wood, never had any trouble with them. We've had some very public issues with some public companies, account seizures and merchant account freezings, just because of the nature of the business. It's not federally illegal yet. T-Mobile effectively shut down our short code, which is what we were using to send out daily deals to our customers. And one day T-Mobile, out of the blue, decided to shut down our third-party processor that was processing our texts because of an unclear violation of terms of service. That was just one of the many impediments that this company had starting up. Marijuana.com was the oldest marijuana domain online. It was purchased in the mid-90s, and Weedmaps, as of today, the proud owner of that domain, and we're going to be integrating it within our Weedmaps network of sites, so marijuana.com will be powered by Weedmaps.
Any profession you have, you like to make light of things. Can't take the job too seriously. So, I mean, the pictures in here, like the one you're filming, it's just humor. The job is stressful, so you try to put a little bit of humor into it.
As modern as California is, as congested as the southern part of the state and the Bay Area is, the northern part of California, particularly the western mountainous regions leading towards the coast, are almost off the grid. If you are not on the major road in that region, you have no cell phone coverage until you get to a town. This is aberrational throughout most of the United States. America's domestic marijuana industry happens to be in the northern part of California. Humboldt, Trinity, and Mendocino counties. The northern part of the state historically has been producing the best and probably the most amount of marijuana in the United States. In the same way that the wine industry in America is totally dominated by California, because the physical region grows the product the best.
Marijuana growing in Humboldt County came to the forefront about 1983 when we had a spike in murders, homicides. I think we had 28 that year for a population of 130,000 people. People started growing outdoors. One plant's worth about $3,500 or so. It began the modern day gold rush, as I like to say, of 1849. I know where I live, the guy behind me grows, because I can smell it. So if the guy's growing dope and he knows I'm a detective sergeant running the marijuana program, it's pretty cut and taken rampant, I think. When the marijuana issue started, it started in our southern area we call Garversville. Marijuana encompasses the whole county of Humboldt now. And we currently have 3 officers that are trying to deal with the marijuana issue with 130,000 people. Our main focus is on large-scale commercial growers. If I get information from an anonymous source that says that John Doe is growing 100 plants at his house, I won't even target that guy. I won't arrest anybody, won't take any plants. Too small of an operation.
What is the location? Oh, sir.
This is a marijuana grow we found in the eastern part of our county. It was on timber company property and U.S. Forest Service property, which is very remote and isolated. These big clumps here, that's all marijuana. You can see how tall the trees are in comparison to all these dots. This is one grow complex, but we had about 10 of them out there. We seized a total of 133,000 marijuana plants. For the state, it's up to around 4 million plants are seized a year now. Last year, it was 7 separate officer-involved shootings in Northern California, so it's very dangerous out in the hills.
Right now we have something like 14 open homicide cases in a county of 138,000. And why? Primarily because of the lucrative aspects of an illegal marijuana trade. And what I have in my county is an illicit trade and or industry and a licit industry that are operating at parallel. The sad thing is that there are probably more people in Humboldt County against the legalization of marijuana than for it. I say sadly because a lot of the people that are against the legalization of marijuana in Humboldt County are people that are growing marijuana. They don't want it to become legal because they don't want the profit margin to disappear. We've become married both to the marijuana industry and to its criminality. Mexican nationals have also figured out that they can take part of this business, and they have come here and started their own marijuana cultivation.
People come all the way up here from Mexico to grow because it's easier to grow in California than trying to smuggle it over the border.
You just drive them up into the hills, and you say, hey, you're going to be here for a couple months. We'll come up periodically and bring you food, water, and then when it comes harvest time, we're going to give you a certain amount of money and let you go. Sometimes they don't do that. We have people that just decide, I just killed my laborers. No one knows they're here. They didn't tell me when they were here. All I have to do is kill them and roll them down a hill. This is a rural area. The animals will make short work of it. They're here illegally. They're easy to erase. Who's going to know about them?
If you look at this, in the United States, most crime is drug-related. So what we have to understand is, as much as people might think marijuana is a benign, simple drug, it is attached to a very violent industry, which is in it just for the money. That's what we have to learn as a society.
There's a small majority of the politicians in Uruguay that want the government to start cultivating marijuana and selling it to their population because they recognize that brings violence and higher prices, insecurity to a lot of people. And so their feeling is that if they were to cultivate it and sell it to those people in Uruguay that are already marijuana smokers, they can basically kill the black market that way. Instead of fighting them with guns, instead of arresting them, just erase the economic incentive.
Whatever we do, the cartels are going to adapt. They're organized crime syndicates. These are very resilient organizations. They're not in it just for the drugs, they're in it for the money. And wherever they can find a measure to make money, they will. The cartels don't just smuggle marijuana, they do heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, DVD smuggling, the human smuggling, the weapons smuggling. I spent 10 years working on my doctoral dissertation on drug cartels.
I know these guys very, very well. It's not about just the drugs, it's about the money.
To think that we would necessarily, in one full swoop, get rid of the underground marijuana business is very naive. And there's going to be an incentive for these businesses to stay in place. They're in place now, they're endemic. To think that they're going to go away just because California is going to legalize marijuana makes absolutely no sense.
So Uruguay is, to me, just ahead of the game. And they're willing to basically buck the voice of the United States in this.
The United States, through our Constitution, has got something called the 10th Amendment, which is states' rights. Well, the United States also has something called the Supremacy Clause, which means that states can do whatever they want so long as it's not in violation of federal law. And the Supremacy Clause and the federal government have been very important to the United States history. Whether it was overcoming slavery with southern states that wanted slavery, the federal government said no. The pro-marijuana people think that because California passed these propositions that they can do whatever they want without consequence. But the federal law trumps state law. In a sense, California wants marijuana, the federal government says no.
Every single person who grows marijuana and every single person that sells marijuana are breaking federal law every single time they do it.
It's a big problem because, we operate totally legally. We comply with all of our state laws, and when we were raided by the federal government, we were in total compliance with state law. They put a gun to my head, screaming at me to get up, get up, get up, and I'm paralyzed, so I couldn't get up. And I tried to point to my braces and crutches next to the bed, which could scarily enough look like weapons because they're metal, and I was trying to pull my ventilator off because I use a breathing machine at night, and they were telling me to put my hands up. It was very, very scary, to be woken up at gunpoint.
The federal government has made hundreds of raids in California, Oregon, and until very recently Washington, on individuals who are growing and selling marijuana.
Let's be very clear here. What you're doing, making millions of dollars, profiting off of marijuana, giving it to anybody who wants it, and mixing it in with other legal drug business, mixing it in with young people having access to it, having them be across the street from schools, etc. That is absolutely not permitted under federal law. We never said it was. And now, guess what? We gave you 2 years, but we're now going to enforce the law.
Department, third floor! Open the door! Police department, third floor! Open the door! Get it!
No politician wants to be soft on drugs. Just like in the 60s, no politician wanted to be soft on communism. And now, no politician wants to be soft on terrorists.
Do I want to arrest the 85-year-old grandmother with 6 months to live, dying a slow death of cancer, who smokes marijuana either through a vaporizer or through cigarettes that she obtains? And do I think that that's a good use of law enforcement resources? Of course not. Nobody thinks that. And that person isn't being arrested.
Everybody says, they don't want to come after patients. We're going after the people that are making money or not complying. But it's not true. They still do go after patients. And they still do go after people who are complying. And as long as you have this tension between the feds and the states, it's going to keep happening because there's people that want to take advantage of that, based on their own personal beliefs.
Personally, I never grew up in the inner city, but my friends that did grow up in the inner city, they can tell you that it's a whole other scenario when you're there, because one of the common ways to get rich and to make it out of the ghetto is to sell drugs. And the only reason why that works is because there's a prohibition on drugs driving the price of drugs incredibly high. Consequences of prohibitions are always the same. The violence skyrockets and the drug use gets harder and harder. When you make it illegal, it turns everything underground. It fuels this entire black market economy, which is ruled by violence. And people are trying to fit smaller and smaller quantities into more and more potent doses, so it's easier to transport. The more you crack down on something, the harder the drugs become. It's called the iron law of prohibition.
During alcohol prohibition in America, it is estimated that 700,000 Americans had a prescription to possess a case of beer or 2 gallons of wine every day. One has to ask oneself, what medical use is there for alcohol?
The alcoholism rates before Prohibition were approximately 10%. There are several studies that looked at Prohibition alcoholism rates at 25% or higher. Okay? So if we made it illegal, why did the drinking rate go up so much? Whenever you try to legislate behavior, especially in America, we have an opinion that says, don't tell us what we can't do. And in fact, if you tell us we can't, we're going to do it. So look at Prohibition. So many people decided that we needed to make alcohol illegal, that we did. And it blew up in our face. Although it took us 13 years to figure it out, for God's sakes, it created a mafia.
Marijuana marijuana prohibition has been so extreme in this country compared to alcohol prohibition. Alcohol prohibition, the only thing that was actually illegal was you simply couldn't possess alcohol and then try to sell it to another person. Marijuana prohibition is so extreme. You can't possess it, you cannot grow it, you cannot use it as a religious sacrament, you cannot use it as a medicine, and even more to the extreme regarding marijuana compared to alcohol, farmers can't even grow the non-psychoactive strain for industrial crops.
Marijuana in general in California is fine. Some people need it medicinally, clearly. I mean, the benefits are, there's data to back up the benefits of medical marijuana. I'm fine with it. I'm actually fine with it even non-medicinally. Weed's not dangerous. It's certainly nowhere near as dangerous as alcohol can be.
To me, it's not an issue about comparing the dangers of alcohol versus marijuana. You can take any drug and say it's not as dangerous as alcohol, and you'd probably be right. It may make people crazy to think that, hey, you know, I can smoke marijuana and I feel much better than I do when I drink alcohol, which I get much more violent when I drink alcohol versus marijuana. But that's not really a concern. We have 2 legal drugs that cause hundreds of billions of dollars in addiction and social costs and health costs. So why would we create another industry like that? It doesn't make sense to me.
How many people die on weed, you know? How many people get enraged and beat up their husband or wife or kids on weed? I don't think that's ever happened in the history of humanity.
You have to remember that today's marijuana, of course, isn't the marijuana that, you know, your grandfather might have smoked. It's not the marijuana that was all about peace, love, at Woodstock. And a lot of the marijuana in the United States is indoor grown. It is manipulated so that the THC content, so the active ingredient, what gets you high, is accentuated. And the other ingredients, which actually have a counterbalancing effect of THC, an ingredient like cannabidiol or CBD, is engineered in a way so its effects are reduced. And that way you get a better high, but also that better high translates into bigger health harms.
One of the more surprising things that people learn when they hear about the process of addiction is the fact that there's nothing out there that gets you high that your brain doesn't already manufacture. All we're doing when we use drugs is we are displacing what's already there with other chemicals. When we put those chemicals into our brain, the end result is our brain stops making the same amount or the same type of chemicals because we're bringing it in from outside. The fact of the matter is, marijuana affects cannabinoid receptors in your brain. It offsets the natural ones that we make, and your brain needs those chemicals in its natural amounts, and it's not making them anymore because you're putting them in. That creates a physical dependence.
Withdrawal symptoms from marijuana, probably most similar to nicotine withdrawal in terms of intensity. They're not as severe as the kind of withdrawal you see with alcohol or with opioids. They're certainly not life-threatening. In other words, it's not going to kill you. It's not medically dangerous, but it's certainly uncomfortable, and it certainly sustains continued use.
What we know is for people who drink or use substances, addictive prescription medications, marijuana, approximately 1 in 10 are going to have a problem. In other words, 9 people can use it just fine, but that a 10th person creates a problem in his or her life.
A consistent and growing set of data and studies which show that there are subtle but significant effects and long-term effects on the quality of cognition and brain function among individuals that are exposed to heavy amounts of marijuana early on.
There's so much misinformation from every side that it would be nice if we could actually have facts. Every time a study comes out that says something positive about marijuana, another one comes out that says something negative. So it remains murky at best. We really need to be doing new research.
Hello, Neil and Buzz. I'm talking to you by telephone from the Oval Room at the White House. And this certainly has to be the most historic telephone call ever made.
Well, I got involved with the drug issue in the late 1960s through a concern about crime in the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., and that was being driven by a heroin epidemic. When I came to the White House, President Nixon said to me, I was the expert on drugs and not him in all ways but one, and that was about marijuana. With respect to marijuana, he had determined that he would, and his administration would oppose marijuana decriminalization. If I showed any signs of favoring decriminalization, I was gone. And I got the message, and it was very easy for me to accept that because my focus was heroin addiction. I wasn't particularly interested in marijuana. I thought it was trivial. I didn't consider it to be a very serious drug issue at the time.
This is the Straight Society, the orderly, well-managed, well-disciplined world of the establishment.
In 1974, Nixon was gone, and now we've got Gerald Ford in. I was the head of the National Institute on Drug Abuse at that time, and the White House drug person. And Gerald Ford had no qualms about decriminalization, so I was quite free to express support for decriminalization. And that made me something of a hero within the pro-drug group at that time. Over the course of my time in the government, marijuana use exploded, and we got to a point where 1 in 9 American high school seniors were smoking marijuana every day. I regretted this new softer line when I became concerned about it. I had tried for years, trying to say marijuana is a problem, but I don't think people should be arrested for marijuana. I don't think it should be a criminal violation. I never said I thought marijuana was a good thing, use of marijuana, and I thought from a health point of view it's a bad thing. I would always say that. But what's really striking about it is everything I said was experienced, understood as either pro-pot or anti-pot. And these discriminations I was making couldn't be translated. The media is a big factor in this, but not because of any maliciousness, but because the media is responding to the audience. If the media makes its money by having eyes, if you have a little bit of eyes, you get a little bit of money. You got a lot of eyes, you get a lot of money. I mean, it's not hard to figure out why they go the direction they do. You stay balanced, nuanced, to use the term, complex. Oh no, you're this side of the line or you're that side of the line, and anything else doesn't matter. You have to be yes or no. It has to go on a bumper sticker or you can't play this game. Gun control, abortion, immigration. Each of those things is phenomenally complex. And it comes down to, are you in favor of abortion or are you against it? Are you in favor of guns or against guns? I mean, it is maddening, but it's everything. Honest to God, that's the way the game goes down. And that's when I said, okay, I've got to there's a line here. I got to be on one side or the other. And the side I needed to be on from a public health point of view was to discourage marijuana use. I could not favor decriminalization and get the message across that marijuana was a problem. It was a bright line that to communicate, I had to be on the correct side or the anti-marijuana side to be able to get that message across.
There's no laws that make marijuana go away, period. We had draconian laws that provided for incarceration for many years for marijuana cases. It didn't work. It's shocking to me, and it's a mystery to me why it remains as it does in the vein it's illegal. Call it plant a crime just doesn't make sense. You've got to have a rational way to deal with it, and I think what we've went down this path has been irrational and a great detriment to so much of our country and so much to the people that live in it and around the world.
We don't have to choose between extreme policies, and that's the issue, and that's the problem with our current dialogue on marijuana today. We're presented with two policy solutions: one, enforcement only; one, legalization. That's not how the real world works. There are practical reasons why somebody should care about this issue. Anybody looking dispassionately at the data would say this is an issue we should look at and we should monitor and we should care about. And frankly, the most cost-effective way to deal with it is to prevent it in the first place.
I'm not an advocate for marijuana. It's not my lifestyle. I'm not advocating its use. And I certainly don't with my kids. What I do advocate is rational government policies. What I see is murders associated with marijuana. Because of the value of it, because we've criminalized it, we have young people that are being killed over it. That's a tremendous individual cost and a tremendous societal cost. I am personally for legalization, and I am a state officer whose responsibility is to enforce the laws of the state of California, whether I agree with them or not.
I've been around and worked with human behavior long enough to understand that laws in some cases are pretty secondary, and people are going to do what they do, whether it's legal or illegal. When it comes to the question of am I for it or am I against it, I simply look at it as a therapist. I'm prepared to deal with whatever the outcome is and help people make decisions that are about what's best in their own lives, regardless of what a law might say.
Say, my point of view, personally, I'd rather see it as state medical marijuana. And then say, let each state drop their own rules and regulations, tax those business entities, use that money for the good of the state. I know it's legal.